The galaxy had known peace for 12,000 years. The elder races had built this peace carefully, like old gardeners tending a vast garden. They watched young species grow. They watched old empires fall. They recorded everything and interfered with nothing. This was their way. This was the law of the Galactic Concord. 3 races sat at the top of this ancient order. The Vethkai were beings of living crystal, their bodies shimmering with colors that showed their emotions. They lived for thousands of years and thought in patterns that younger species could barely understand. The Mordellan were older still, vast creatures that floated through space itself, their bodies larger than moons. And the Thoughtweavers were strangest of all, beings of pure consciousness that existed between dimensions, speaking in whispers that touched the mind directly. These 3 had seen everything. They had watched the rise and fall of 9,000 civilizations. They had seen wars that burned entire star systems. They had seen plagues that killed billions. Nothing surprised them anymore. Then they found humanity. The humans were young, so very young. They had only discovered how to travel between stars 300 years ago. They had only 17 colony worlds, clustered together in an unremarkable corner of an unremarkable spiral arm. By galactic standards, they were infants taking their first steps. Ambassador Keth Voran of the Vethkai was assigned to study them. She spent decades observing their strange civilization. She watched them build and fight and love and die. She learned their languages, read their books, studied their history. Her report was simple. Humans are adaptive and clever. They breed quickly and die quickly. They feel emotions with great intensity, but lack the patience for long-term planning. They pose no threat to galactic order, recommend minimal observation. Priority level low. The report was filed away with thousands of others. The elder races turned their attention to more important matters. Nobody noticed when the Drak hegemony began moving warships toward human space. The Drak were conquerors. They had been conquerors for 6,000 years. Their empire spread across 200 star systems. Built on the labor of 40 conquered species, they were reptilian creatures, cold-blooded in body and soul, with scales like black armor and eyes like yellow fire. Warlord Krazix commanded the Drak military. He was old for his kind, nearly 300 years, and he had personally overseen the conquest of 7 species. He looked at the human colonies the way a predator looks at prey. They have 17 worlds, he told his generals. They have fewer than 15 billion people. Their military is small and outdated. We will take them in one swift campaign. His tactical officers ran the calculations. The numbers were clear. The humans had no chance. The Drak positioned 300 warships along human trade routes. They cut communication lines. They blocked supply ships. Slowly, quietly, they surrounded the human colonies like a hunter surrounding its prey. The humans noticed, of course. They sent diplomatic messages asking about the Drak intentions. The messages were ignored. They sent ships to investigate. The ships never returned. On Earth, the government held emergency meetings. Military leaders argued about strategy. Politicians debated about responses. Ordinary people went about their ordinary lives, trusting that their leaders would solve the problem. Nobody wanted war. Humanity had never faced a true galactic power before. They knew they were outmatched. They hoped that diplomacy would find a way. It was a hope that would die very soon. Ambassador Keth Voran received reports about the Drak movements. She reviewed them with the cold logic of her kind. The mathematics were simple. The Drak were stronger. The humans were weaker. The outcome was predetermined. She considered sending a warning to the human government. She considered asking the conquered to intervene. But the laws were clear. The elder races did not interfere in conflicts between younger species. It was not their place to pick winners and losers. Besides, what did it matter? The humans would be conquered. They would serve the Drak for a few centuries. Eventually, they would be absorbed into the hegemony like all the others. This was the natural order of things. The strong consumed the weak. It had always been so. Keth Voran filed her observations and moved on to other matters. She did not understand what she was looking at. None of the elder races did. They saw a small, weak species about to be conquered by a larger, stronger one. They saw a mathematical certainty. They did not see the steel beneath the human smile. They did not understand that humans were different from other species. Humans had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had survived ice ages and plagues and predators and each other. They had crawled out of caves and built cities and split the atom and reached for the stars. Every human carried the memories of 10,000 generations of survivors. In their genes was written a simple truth: never give up, never surrender, never stop fighting until you are dead. The elder races knew none of this. They saw only the numbers, and the numbers said the humans would fall. On the Drak flagship, Warlord Krazix reviewed his invasion plans one final time. Tomorrow, his fleet would strike at New Valencia, humanity's agricultural heart. They would demand surrender. If the humans refused, they would begin orbital bombardment. Krazix expected the humans to refuse at first. Young species always did. They would fight for a few days, perhaps a few weeks. Then they would see the futility of resistance. Then, they would kneel. He had done this many times before. He knew how the story ended, or so he thought. Across the galaxy, in her crystalline chamber, Ambassador Keth Varan suddenly felt a strange sensation. It was something her kind rarely experienced. It took her a moment to identify it. It was unease. She did not know why. The mathematics were clear. The outcome was certain. There was nothing to worry about. Yet the feeling persisted, like a shadow at the edge of her vision. She dismissed it as irrelevant and returned to her work. In the dark between stars, 300 Drak warships moved toward New Valencia. Their crews prepared their weapons. Their commanders reviewed their orders. Their warlord dreamed of another easy conquest. None of them knew that they were about to wake something ancient and terrible, something that had slept in humanity's heart since the first human ancestor picked up a rock and refused to die. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. The quiet before the storm was almost over. The sky above New Valencia turned black with enemy ships. 300 Drak warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at exactly the same moment. They spread across the sky like a dark blanket, blocking out the stars. Each ship was massive, covered in weapons, carrying thousands of soldiers ready for ground invasion. Below them, 4 billion humans looked up in terror. New Valencia was a beautiful world. Green fields stretched from horizon to horizon. Rivers of clean water flowed through valleys. Cities of glass and steel rose beside ancient forests. This was humanity's breadbasket, the planet that fed a dozen other colonies. Now it was a target. Warlord Krazix broadcast his message on every frequency. His reptilian face filled screens across the planet. His yellow eyes burned with cold confidence. "People of New Valencia," he said, "you have one rotation of your planet to surrender completely. Give us your world. Give us your people. Give us everything. If you refuse, we will burn your cities from orbit. There will be no second warning." He cut the transmission and waited. His officers had already calculated the response time. The humans would panic. They would argue among themselves. Eventually, they would realize they had no choice. But the response came much faster than expected. Governor Elena Vasquez appeared on screen. She was a small woman, 50 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother. She looked like she should be baking cookies, not facing an alien invasion. "Warlord Krazix," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "You should have brought more ships." Then she cut the transmission. Krazix stared at the blank screen. For a moment, he did not understand. Then he laughed. His officers laughed with him. This tiny human female, threatening them? It was absurd. It was hilarious. "They will learn," Krazix said. "Give the order. Destroy their orbital defenses." The attack began. New Valencia had 47 defensive ships. They were old vessels, many of them converted cargo haulers with weapons bolted on. They had no chance against 300 Drak warships. Everyone knew this. The mathematics were clear. The humans attacked anyway. The first wave of human ships crashed into the Drak formation like a fist into a hornet's nest. They did not fight like any species the Drak had faced before. They did not try to survive. They did not try to retreat. They simply attacked with everything they had. Captain Jorge Mendez commanded a destroyer with a crew of 200. His ship was hit in the first minutes of battle. Fires burned through the lower decks. The engines were failing. His tactical officer reported that they had perhaps 10 minutes before total system failure. Mendez looked at the Drak carrier in front of him. It was 10 times the size of his ship. It carried fighters that could destroy colonies. "All hands," he said into the communicator. "It has been an honor. Now let us give them something to remember." He aimed his dying ship at the carrier and fired the engines at full power. The collision killed everyone aboard the destroyer. It also killed 4,000 Drak soldiers and destroyed one of their largest warships. This scene repeated again and again across the battlefield. Human pilots flew their fighters directly into Drak engine systems. Human gunners kept firing until their weapons melted from heat. Human captains crashed their ships into enemy vessels rather than surrender. The Drak had never seen anything like this. They had conquered dozens of species. All of them fought the same way. They calculated odds. They recognized when they were beaten. They surrendered to preserve their lives. The humans did not surrender. They did not even seem to understand the concept. Admiral Sophia Chen commanded the human defense from the flagship Defiant Hope. She watched her fleet die around her. She watched brave men and women throw away their lives to buy more time, and she kept fighting. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we have lost 38 ships. We are down to 9 vessels. The Drak have lost." He paused, checking his instruments. "The Drak have lost 112 warships." Sophia felt no joy at this number. She felt only cold determination. "Continue the attack," she ordered. "Make them pay for every inch of space." The battle lasted 19 hours. When it ended, not a single human ship remained. Every pilot, every crew member, every defender of New Valencia was dead, but they had taken a third of the Drak fleet with them. Warlord Krazik stood on his bridge and stared at the battle reports. He had never lost so many ships against a single enemy. He had never imagined it was possible. His hands were shaking. He told himself, it was anger, not fear. "Begin the bombardment," he ordered. His voice was not as steady as before. "Burn the planet. Kill them all. Leave nothing." The remaining Drak ships opened fire. For 6 hours, they poured destruction onto New Valencia. Cities vanished in nuclear fire. Oceans boiled away. Mountains crumbled into dust. The beautiful green world became a blackened corpse. 4 billion humans died that day. Krazik transmitted images of the destruction to every human colony. He expected surrender. He expected tears and begging and submission. Instead, he received a transmission from Earth. There were no words. Only an image showing the location of every human world, every ship, every station. And beneath the coordinates, a single gesture that needed no translation. Krazik did not understand. His translators did not understand. They had to ask captured humans what the gesture meant. When they learned, Krazik felt something he had not felt in 200 years of conquest. He felt afraid, because the gesture meant that humanity was not surrendering. They were not begging for mercy. They were telling him, in the simplest possible terms, that they would rather die than kneel. All of them. Every last one. And as Krazik would soon learn, humans who had nothing left to lose were the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The siege of New Valencia was over. The war was just beginning. The human response began 3 days after New Valencia burned. It started quietly. A Drak supply station lost contact with headquarters. Then another. Then a dozen more. Communication satellites went dark across the hegemony. Military databases became corrupted, eating themselves from the inside. The Drak thought it was equipment failure. They sent repair crews. The repair crews disappeared. Then the real attacks began. For decades, human traders had traveled through Drak space. They had smiled and made deals and asked for nothing but fair prices. They had been so friendly, so harmless, that no one suspected anything. Nobody knew that those traders had been planting seeds. Hidden programs slept in Drak computer systems, waiting for activation signals. Tiny devices sat in power stations and water treatment plants, patient as stones. Human agents had embedded themselves in Drak society, learning secrets, making maps, preparing for a day that most hoped would never come. That day had come. Admiral Maya Chen now commanded all human military forces. She had taken over after Sophia Chen died defending New Valencia. The two women had not been related by blood. Now they were related by something deeper. Maya sat in a command center buried deep beneath Earth's surface. Screens surrounded her, showing data from across the galaxy. Her staff worked in silence, their faces grim. "Begin Phase 1, she ordered. Across Drac space, the sleeping programs woke up. Power grids failed on 17 worlds simultaneously. Water purification systems broke down. Food storage facilities reported contamination. Hospitals lost access to medical supplies. Communication networks collapsed into chaos. The Drac military tried to respond, but their command structure was blind. Their encrypted channels had been compromised. Their orders were intercepted, changed, misdirected. Ships meant to reinforce one system arrived at another. Troops meant to guard supply lines found themselves guarding empty space. It was not an attack. It was a dismantling. Ambassador Keth Varan watched the reports with growing horror. She had studied war for thousands of years. She had seen brutal conflicts, savage battles, terrible destruction. She had never seen anything like this. "They are not fighting the Drac military," she reported to the Concord. "They are fighting the Drac civilization. They are targeting food, water, power, medicine. They are trying to make 47 worlds unable to support life." The other elders did not understand. "That is inefficient," the Mordalan representative said. "If they want to defeat the Drac, they should attack military targets." Keth Varan shook her crystalline head. "You do not understand. The humans are not trying to defeat the Drac. They are trying to make them suffer. They are trying to make them starve." She paused, searching her memory for the human word. "They call it total war." The concept was alien to galactic civilization. War had rules. War had limits. You fought enemy soldiers, not enemy farmers. You destroyed military bases, not hospitals. You accepted surrender when it was offered. Humans followed different rules. Or rather, they followed no rules at all. While the infrastructure attacks continued, human strike teams moved through Drac space like ghosts. They attacked supply convoys. They sabotaged shipyards. They assassinated officers and burned military academies. And then came the asteroids. The Drac homeworld orbited a yellow star in the heart of their empire. It was a fortress world, protected by hundreds of defensive platforms and thousands of ships. Nobody could attack it directly. The humans did not attack it directly. Instead, they went to the outer reaches of the star system, where ancient rocks floated in cold silence. They attached engines to these rocks. They programmed courses. They began to push. 27 asteroids, each larger than a city, began moving toward the Drac homeworld. They moved slowly at first, then faster still. The Drac detected them too late. They tried to destroy the asteroids with weapons fire. Some shattered, but the fragments kept coming. They tried to deflect them with tractor beams. The asteroids were too massive. They tried to evacuate their cities. There was not enough time. The first asteroid struck the northern continent at 10% of light speed. The impact created a crater 200 miles wide. The shockwave flattened cities 1,000 miles away. Dust and debris filled the atmosphere, blocking out the sun. Fires burned across entire landmasses. 1 billion Drac died in the first hour. Warlord Krazix watched from his flagship in orbit. He had fled the planet when the asteroids were detected. Now he watched his homeworld burn, just as he had burned New Valencia. A transmission arrived from Earth. Admiral Maya Chen appeared on his screen. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was gray at the temples. She spoke in a calm, quiet voice that somehow made her words more terrible. "Warlord Krazix," she said. "You killed 4 billion of my people. I am going to kill 4 billion of yours. This is not revenge. This is education. I am teaching you what fairness looks like." Krazix tried to respond, to offer surrender, to beg for mercy. The transmission ended before he could speak. More asteroids fell over the following days. Some struck the homeworld. Others hit colony planets. Each impact was precisely calculated to cause maximum damage, while leaving the planet technically survivable. The Drac were not being exterminated. They were being punished. Across the galaxy, other species watched in terrified silence. They had never imagined that war could be fought this way. They had never imagined that any species would be willing to fight this way. The humans had shown them something new. They had shown them what happened when you pushed a species past the point of caring about its own survival. They had shown them what humans became when they had nothing left to lose. And the galaxy would never forget the lesson. The Galactic Concord met for the first time in 3 centuries. The elder races had not gathered like this since the Void Plague threatened to consume half the galaxy. That crisis had required their combined wisdom to solve. This crisis was different. This crisis required them to make a choice that could reshape galactic civilization forever. The meeting chamber floated in deep space, far from any star. It was ancient beyond measure, built by a species that had died before the elders themselves were born. Crystal walls held the vacuum at bay. Strange lights drifted through the air like living things. The Mordelon arrived first, their vast bodies flowing through space like living continents. They settled around the chamber, their countless eyes reflecting the starlight. They had seen more years than most species had existed. They had watched galaxies collide and stars die. They thought they had seen everything. The Thought Weavers came next, appearing as ripples in reality, patches of space that whispered directly into the mind. They did not have bodies in any traditional sense. They existed between dimensions, touching the physical world only when necessary. Ambassador Kethvaran represented the Vethkai. Her crystalline form pulsed with troubled colors. She had spent more time studying humans than any other elder. She had thought she understood them. Now she realized she had understood nothing. "We must make a decision," the senior Mordalan rumbled. Its voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. "The humans have broken the laws of civilized warfare. They attack civilians. They destroy infrastructure. They use weapons of mass destruction against populated worlds. This cannot be allowed." Kethvaran felt the weight of those words. The Mordalan was right. By every standard of galactic civilization, the humans had become monsters. But she had also studied the Drak attack on New Valencia. She had watched the recordings of 4 billion people dying in nuclear fire, while Warlord Krazix laughed. "The Drak struck first," she said. "They killed 4 billion humans without warning or provocation." "That does not justify the human response," the Mordalan replied. "2 wrongs do not make a right. The humans are becoming as bad as the Drak. Perhaps worse." A thought weaver rippled into existence, its whispered words touching every mind in the chamber. "We must consider the question of precedent. If we allow the humans to destroy the Drak through total war, other species will learn from their example. They will see that such methods work. The careful peace we have built for 12,000 years will collapse." Kethvaran considered this argument. It was logical. It was reasonable. It was exactly the kind of thinking that the elder races had used to justify 12,000 years of non-interference. It was also, she realized, the thinking that had allowed the Drak to massacre 4 billion innocents while the Concord watched. "May I share something?" she asked. The other elders indicated their agreement. Kethvaran activated a display. Human records filled the chamber. Images, documents, histories, philosophies. The collected knowledge of a young species laid bare. "I have studied humanity extensively," she said. "I have read their history. I have learned their stories. And I have discovered something that I believe we have overlooked." She highlighted a particular concept, translating it for the other elders. "Humans have a term for what they become when trapped. They call it the cornered animal. When a creature has no escape, no hope of survival, it does not surrender. It attacks with everything it has. It fights without regard for its own life. It becomes, in human terms, more dangerous than any predator." The images shifted, showing human history. Wars fought against impossible odds. Empires that fell to rebellions they had dismissed as insignificant. Last stands that became legends. We assumed humans would behave like other young species. We assumed they would calculate the odds, recognize their weakness, and submit to the Drak. We were wrong. Her crystalline form shifted to deep crimson, the color of her people's distress. When we allowed the Drak to corner them, we did not create surrender. We created 14 billion survivors who believe they have nothing left to lose. We created a species that has decided death is preferable to submission. And now we face the consequences of our assumption. The chamber fell silent. What do you propose? The senior Mordellan asked. Kethvaran had thought about this for many cycles. The answer still frightened her. I propose that we recognize humanity as a protected species under Concord law. I propose that we offer them mediation and support. I propose that we treat them as equals, not as children to be managed. You want us to reward their violence? The Mordellan sounded incredulous. I want us to survive their violence, Kethvaran replied. Consider the mathematics. The Drak hegemony is collapsing. Within a decade, it will cease to exist. A 6,000-year empire, destroyed by a species that discovered fire less than 100,000 years ago. She let that fact settle into the minds of the other elders. Now, consider what happens if we oppose humanity. If we try to stop their war against the Drak. If we make ourselves their enemy. The images shifted again, showing human weapons, human tactics, human determination. They will fight us the same way they are fighting the Drak. They will burn our worlds. They will poison our systems. They will never surrender, never retreat, never stop, because they no longer fear death. Death is what the Drak brought them. Death is what they have learned to embrace. The Thoughtweavers rippled with agitation. The Mordellan shifted uneasily. We are the elder races, the senior Mordellan said, but its voice held doubt now. We have guided the galaxy for thousands of years. Surely we can defeat one young species. Perhaps, Kethvaran agreed. Perhaps we could destroy them entirely. But at what cost? How many of our own worlds would burn? How many of our people would die? And even if we won, what would we become? We would become the thing we claim to oppose. We would become destroyers of civilizations. She moved to the center of the chamber, her light pulsing with every color of emotion her kind could feel. I say we choose differently. I say we extend our hand to humanity. Not because they deserve it, not because they are right, but because it is the wise thing to do. Because peace is better than war. Because we have a chance to guide this species toward something better, if only we are wise enough to take it. The vote took many hours. In the end, the Concord chose peace. They chose wisely, but deep in their ancient hearts, the elder races knew the truth. They were not choosing peace out of wisdom or compassion. They were choosing peace because they were afraid, and that fear would shape the galaxy for generations to come. The war did not end with ceremony or celebration. It ended with silence. The Drak hegemony, which had stood for 6,000 years, simply stopped existing. Its military was broken. Its infrastructure was dust. Its population was scattered across 100 worlds. Refugees begging for shelter from species they had once conquered. The 47 worlds of the hegemony were declared quarantine zones. No ships entered. No communications escaped. The Drak survivors lived among the ruins of their civilization, scratching for survival on planets their ancestors had ruled as gods. It was not genocide. The humans had been very careful about that. They had killed exactly 4 billion Drak, the same number that had died on New Valencia. Not one more, not one less. Perfect balance. Perfect justice. Perfect horror. Humanity accepted the Concord's offer of recognition. They signed treaties with flowing pens and solemn promises. They joined councils and committees and commissions. They smiled at their new galactic neighbors and spoke of peace and cooperation. Everyone smiled back. Everyone agreed that this was a new beginning. Everyone pretended that they had not spent the last decade watching humanity burn an empire to the ground. The signing ceremony took place on a neutral station, built specifically for this moment. Representatives from 100 species gathered to witness the birth of a new era. Ambassador Kethvaran attended as the Concord's official liaison to humanity. She found herself seated across from Admiral Maya Chen. The human woman had aged greatly since the war began. Her hair was completely gray now. Lines crossed her face like old roads. Her eyes held a weariness that seemed to reach back centuries, but there was steel beneath that weariness. Kethvaran could see it clearly. Your people will be watching us, Chen said quietly, during a break in the ceremonies. It was not a question. Yes, Kethvaran admitted. You have frightened us. All of us. Even the Mordellan, who have seen the birth and death of stars. Chen nodded slowly. She did not seem proud or pleased. She seemed sad. We frightened ourselves, she said. When I gave the order to redirect those asteroids, when I watched them fall on Drac cities, I felt something die inside me. Something I will never get back. Kethvaran studied the human carefully. Do you regret your actions? Every day, every hour, every moment. Chen's voice was soft but steady. But I would do it again, because the alternative was watching my species kneel before monsters, because surrender would have meant the death of everything we were. She turned to face Kethvaran directly. Her eyes held no apology. Your Concord watched the Drac attack us. You watched them murder 4 billion innocent people. You did nothing. Your laws of non-interference meant nothing to the children who burned in New Valencia's cities. Kethvaran wanted to defend herself. She wanted to explain the mathematics, the careful balance, the greater good that the elder races protected. But the words would not come, because Chen was right. So let me give you a new law, Chen continued. Teach it to every species in your Concord. Carve it into every monument. Make sure that every civilization in this galaxy understands it. She leaned forward. And despite her age, despite her weariness, despite her grief, she radiated a presence that made Kethvaran want to step backward. Never corner a human, Chen said. When we have nothing left to lose, we become something your calculations cannot predict. We become revenge made flesh. We become extinction given form. We become the last thing our enemies ever see. The words hung in the air like prophecy. But treat us fairly. Chen continued, and her voice softened. Give us room to live, to grow, to raise our children under peaceful stars, and we will be the best friends your galaxy has ever known. We will fight for you. We will die for you. We will build wonders that last 10,000 years. She smiled. And for a moment, Kethvaran saw the grandmother that Chen might have been in a different life. The choice is yours. The choice has always been yours. Just remember what happens when you choose wrong. The ceremony concluded. Treaties were signed. Hands were shaken. Promises were made. And the warning spread. It traveled at the speed of light, and faster. It was translated into every language. It was carved into monuments and written into laws. It became the first lesson taught to young diplomats, and the last advice given to old warriors. The elder races have spoken. Never corner humans. Some species thought it was exaggeration. Surely no race could be that dangerous. Surely the stories were propaganda, designed to make humanity seem more fearsome than they really were. Those species usually took tours of the quarantine zones. They saw the burned worlds. They saw the crater-scarred continents. They saw the ruined cities, where a proud empire had once stood. And they saw the monuments. The humans had built them on every world they had destroyed. Not monuments of victory or triumph, monuments of grief. Each monument listed names. 4 billion names, carved in stone that would endure until the stars themselves burned out. Human names, the dead of New Valencia. Beneath the names, a message was carved in every known language. We did not want this. You made us become this. Remember, visitors stood before these monuments in silence. They read the names. They tried to imagine 4 billion lives, 4 billion stories, 4 billion futures that would never exist. And they understood. Humanity had not fought the war against the Drac out of cruelty or hatred. They had fought it out of grief. Every asteroid that fell, every city that burned, every death they caused was a reflection of the deaths they had suffered. Perfect balance, perfect justice, perfect horror. The galaxy entered a new era. It was not the peaceful era that the elder races had maintained for 12,000 years. It was something different. Something watchful. Something careful. Species treated each other with new respect. Old grudges were set aside. Disputes were resolved through diplomacy rather than force. Everyone remembered what had happened to the Drac. Everyone remembered what could happen if they pushed too hard. Humanity took its place among the stars. They traded and explored and built and dreamed. They made friends and formed alliances. They shared their art and music and stories with species that had existed since before Earth was born. They were good neighbors, generous, kind, helpful. But late at night, in quiet conversations, in whispered warnings, the truth was always remembered. Behind the smiles and the handshakes and the treaties, there lived a species forged in fire and baptized in blood. A species that had looked into the void and refused to blink. A species that had proven, beyond any doubt, what they were capable of when pushed too far. The humans walked among the stars now, and wherever they went, fear walked beside them. Not fear of what they were, fear of what they could become. And in the end, that fear kept the peace better than any treaty ever could. The day fear returned to the galaxy was the day humanity earned its place among the elder races. Not through wisdom or age or power, through the simple, terrible truth that some species should never, ever be cornered. This was the lesson the galaxy learned. This was the warning that echoed through eternity. This was the day fear returned, and nothing would ever be the same.